Hey guys, this is Dan for BladeReviews.com, and today I'm taking a look at the Boker Vox BOB, designed by Jesper Voxness of Vox Knives in Denmark. And this is a very handsome fixed blade knife that I was extremely interested in acquiring. And having used and carried it for a while, I'm ready to give you a little bit of a video review here. So let's do some quick specs. The Vox BOB has an overall length of 7 3/4 inches. It's got a 3 3/4 inch long blade, and it weighs 9.5 ounces. So yes, this is a pretty stout knife, and it all makes sense when you take a look at the handle here and the way the knife has been constructed. You can see that the Vox BOB has a very thick blade stock. This is 7mm thick Aus 8, and it really adds to the weight of the knife. So when I first got this knife, I was, I don't want to say puzzled, but slightly interested into what was the theory behind the design, because I could see this being used in a couple different applications, but I just couldn't quite put my finger on where exactly Jesper was coming from. So who better to talk to than the man himself? I had sent him an email, and he was very, very kind and nice enough to not only respond, but provide a lot of good information, and he was just a very, very nice guy to speak with in general. And his idea was that the Vox BOB is a bug-out bag knife, and indeed Bob actually stands for bug-out bag, a little detail that I had missed, so I thought that that was kind of clever. And his rationale was he wanted something that was small enough for a bag or a pocket, but he wanted it to be heavy enough to get some chopping done. He wanted it to be thin enough to slice well, yet thick enough to split wood. And finally, he wanted something that could be used to field dress game and skin animals. So quite a long list of stuff, and I think he really did check pretty much everything off, list by, point by point here. So we're going to go through the knife and take a closer look and see how he realized that in the form of this compact little fixed blade knife. So the blade here is an attractive clip point, just a classic looking blade. Of course, it is a little more compact than I guess the more traditional versions of the knife would be, and it's got a ton of belly, a nice little swedge, and a fairly nice tip on there too. You can see that you've got that ultra thick blade steel here, and it would seem that this knife wouldn't slice that well, but it actually, since it's got this full flat grind, performs really well in the kitchen. I've used this knife a lot and sliced a bunch of tomatoes and various vegetables and stuff, and I'll tell you, it really does perform in that capacity. As for a skinning blade, I didn't get the chance to take this on a hunting trip or anything, but you can see it's got that large amount of belly, and it came exceptionally sharp, so I don't doubt that it would work for such tasks too. Blade steel on this knife, as I mentioned, is Aus 8, and initially I wasn't sure about that choice of material, but having thought about it and having heard from Jesper about what his intended use was for the knife, I think it was actually a very good choice if you're going to go for a stainless steel. Since this is an outdoors blade, something to be used in an emergency or disaster type scenario, I would want something that is very tough, easy to sharpen, and forgiving under hard use type circumstances. So what I mean by that is you would want a knife that wouldn't crack or chip out terribly if you were to be, say, chopping with it, and then maybe you missed or something and you hit like a small rock. You wouldn't want it to crack your blade in half. That would be game over. And if you're using a stainless steel, a lot of those high-end steels are just going to be too brittle, I think. So Aus 8 was nice because it is stainless, so you can have this beautiful satin finish, yet still get good toughness and ease of sharpening. I really do think if it's going to be used on a lot of wood or as a camp knife or something like that, Aus 8 was actually a very nice choice. So a well-rationalized decision on their part, I feel. The handle here has got some very attractive green and red micarta scales. You've got the green micarta with the red liner, and it gives the knife kind of an understated sort of European look to it that I really, really like. And you've got these simple tubular pins to hold everything together, in addition to a bunch of epoxy, I imagine, and it really has been nicely finished. Everything lines up flush. This knife is made in China, so which is not necessarily a bad thing. I've actually handled a number of nice Chinese knives, but still, I looked at the level of fit and finish quite closely and was very pleased with the way everything had been put together. In hand, the knife feels very good. In more of a standard grip, you can get 4 fingers on there without a problem. It feels good for the thumb. There's no jimping or anything, but you've got such a broad and flat piece of steel here that I really don't feel like jimping is necessary, and it might spoil the nice lines on here. With this very large finger choil, I notice that your hand's not slipping forward anyways, so I do like the way the ergonomics have been designed. If you were to throw this knife into a reverse grip, it feels quite comfortable here too, although I don't think the knife is going to get a ton of use in reverse grip. But one thing to call your attention to is the pommel here where my thumb is resting. And this has kind of an interesting story to it. This is what Jesper calls a bonk stud. His words, a bonk stud. And of course, he acknowledged that many people would call this a skull crusher or a non-lethal impact device. But in his mind, he thought that this knife would be more used as a tool than a weapon, and that this would be used to crush small branches and twigs and to create tinder. So mainly used as a hammer more than anything. But of course, it could be a non-lethal impact device if the situation required that, but I thought that was a nice little touch and kind of an interesting story. So you've got a bonk stud on this knife, and no doubt you could crack some walnuts with this thing, one way or the other. So that pretty much rounds out the knife and the handle construction, the ergonomics. Let's take a closer look, or let's take a first look at the sheath here. And the sheath is actually very, very nice. It's made of Kydex, black Kydex, and it's been beautifully finished. Now, Jesper actually told me that this sheath has been handmade by Tom Krein, and each knife that you buy gets a handmade and hand-fitted Tom Krein sheath, which is really something else on a nice production knife like this. I mean, you just you don't get this kind of quality and a handmade sheath. I mean, it just doesn't happen. So I thought that was exceptional. And this sheath in practice is really nice. There's no blade wiggling or anything like that. There's no rattling, and the level of retention is excellent. It just comes out without too much effort, but it's not going to fall out either. Slips in with a nice snap. Really, really well done. You also get a tech lock here, which can be mounted either vertically or horizontally, depending on what your system of carry is. I've been carrying this around with a vertical carry on my belt, and it's nice and comfortable. It's a heavy knife, but distributed along the way to your body, it's not too bad, I don't think. And again, considering that this thing could not only do the detail tasks and nice slicing, but also it's designed to chop and split and all that, I think it's quite a versatile tool for under 10 ounces. So you get this beautiful knife, and you get this really nicely done sheath with a tech lock, and it's all very well done. So that kind of brings us to the conclusion of the review. I wanted to talk about the price, which is around $125. Now, if it was just the knife alone, I think that would be kind of steep. AUS 8 is a nice material, and this is a nicely made knife, but over in China, let's face it, it didn't cost them $100 to do that. But when you factor in this really nice handmade sheath, I think it becomes an exceptional value, since you're not going to get a lot of knives of this kind of nice details to it, this level of fit and finish and sharpness and stuff with a beautiful handmade sheath. So to me, that's what makes this package so desirable. And really, it takes a cool design and makes it a cool design on a very functional knife. That's a great deal. So that's my take on the Boker Vox Bob, guys. I hope you enjoyed the review. Again, this is Dan for BladeReviews.com. Please let me know if you have any comments or questions. Take care, guys. Be safe, and I'll be back soon with another knife review.